to the plants. So there's so many mysteries that we're unwinding, and a lot of people are drawn to these sacred sites for these activations on a very deep energetic core level.
Did you feel certain activations or encodings or things coming in, especially based on kind of where we are now in this, wild time on Earth?
Yeah, so each temple has its own vibration. So every time I would go in one, you could feel sort of like what I desired. It was like that draw to go in, and some of them I really resonated with. So I was like trying not to run into the temple because the pull and the activation is there. It's so present, and even if people are there just looking, what I was noticing was everybody's receiving the activation for what they need. So it was really powerful. And each this year versus my last year trip, it was the activations were different. They were deeper. It was as I evolve, those activations are going to wake up different parts of me. So it was pretty amazing.
Interesting. We're going to dive into that a little more because it definitely informs kind of where we're at. In your life, you had to overcome some healing challenges. What was going on? What was happening with you, Dr. Bernadette?
Yeah, so I came in as what I call an open intuitive, and I grew up in a religious family that didn't understand it. So there was a lot of fear and sort of like we think it's voodoo. We don't know what's going on with our child. So I could see energy, I could see it in people's fields, I could hear their thoughts, I could understand animals, and I thought that was normal. So fast forward, I ended up shutting down my gifts and my intuition. And up to that point, I literally had never been sick in the hospital. And within 6 months, I started gaining weight, getting sick, having immune issues. And it wasn't until I got into college that I started to realize how much I had shut my intuition down. And fast forward to vet school. I'm in vet school and, we're trying to do the normal stuff with classes. But what happened was right after I got out, my true awakening moment was I actually cut my arm and severed my
Mm.
radial artery. And what the doctor said was that I would never work, I would never have a job, and I would have a paralyzed arm. Um, so what happened was I really dug deep because that was not going to be my reality, but I didn't know how to heal that. I was like, I know I'm need and want and have to have a functioning arm for my life and for my veterinary career and what I want to do. So it was like something in my soul clicked in. All of a sudden, I was getting downloads of this is how you need to heal your arm. This is how you need to bring in the heart energy. This is how you need to feel it in your body. And I'm sharing that because so often we forget the feeling part. Our mind takes
Yes.
over and says, hey, this is how I have to heal, and we don't feel it. So that was pivotal in opening me up into this pathway, along with one of my pets, bringing me into this journey to say, hey, we are connected and we're here to help each other.
Interesting. When you wisdom from spirit, what were some of the things that in your life spirit was asking you to connect into or look deeper into personally?
Yeah, so for me, I had to really get out of my own way.
Mm.
And I say that because I can be a very stubborn human, and I come from a very strong line of very strong, independent women. And we really have to kind of do a lot of things on our own. So I had to really clear that idea that I had to do it on my own, that it had to be hard, that I had to struggle, that life had to be chaotic. Because up to that point, that's how I was living my life. And spirit came through and was like, whoa, time out. This is really, excuse my language, ass backwards. This isn't how we need to do it.
Wow. Do you see, like, when you look in or you work with people, do you get that message from spirit coming in like words? Do you see things in people? How does it start to show up for you, Dr. Bernadette, when you're working in the healing arts?
Yeah, so when I work with people, they, always say, "Hey, what's the issue? What are we working on?" So we start a conversation, and usually it'll show up like either a movie scene or
Oh,
I'll be dropped into a past life, but a lot of times it's a feeling. I know right where in their body that energy is stuck.
oh,
And then I am really big on teaching my people how to work with their own energy. So instead of giving them the answer, I'm like, "Okay, tell me where your body are feeling it. Let's dive in. What's the belief?" But I'm already going in on the soul level to say, wow, this was started around the mother's line and generational. So it kind of drops in different ways, but it's really a feeling and a knowing followed by a picture or an image or an impression. And then I always go to the human or the animal to say, hey, let's flesh this out because that's where their aha, their understanding comes from.
Now, this gets into the very unique part about you is that you're a holistic veterinarian. What does that mean? And then we'll talk about how you kind
Yeah.
of see the energy in animals. What is a
Yeah.
holistic veterinarian?
So holistic in my world is where I look at the whole picture. I was trained traditionally, and then when I got out of
Oh, wow.
school, I got trained in acupuncture, chiropractic, myofascial, and essential oils, and all these energy things. Because when I was going through vet school, the animals kept telling me, I don't need to be here if we healed the emotional piece. If we
Oh,
got,
my gosh.
yeah.
They
So I'm
would
standing,
tell you that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm standing in my fourth year clinical rotations, and my brain is like doing the emoji where it's blowing up because I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information because it's a very traditional path. So
Yeah.
the holistic side is saying, well, can I put that on a whole picture and what can I add in a package so I can serve
Right.
me, my clients, and the patients better?
Wow. So really quick, the animals would tell you things like, I don't need to be here if we could heal this emotional thing. So what type of emotions were the animals showing you that they knew they needed to heal? They knew they needed to realign.
Yeah, so I'll give you a really good example. So I walked into my internal medicine rotation, fourth year. The resident's supposed to go in with me. So I go in with the resident and another student, and there's this gentleman in his black lab. And he's been to multiple veterinarians and they can't figure out what's wrong. They're convinced it's either food or allergies. And the dog is literally doing like 360s around the exam room. And he comes up and sits in front of me and stares at me and says, "It's not me, it's my dad." And I'm like, "What?"
My dad. So it's the father of the lab, right?
No, no, his human, his human. He meant dad is his human. And I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
yep. So I was like, and I look at my classmate and I was like, "Did you hear something?" And she's like, "No." I was like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, they leave to work up the dog. I had a few more questions for the owner on the intake form, and the dog comes in and says, "My dad has a lot of stress. There's a lot of emotional stuff going on in his life. I'm just overreacting to help him understand, to help him heal."
Oh,
So I finish my intake, I leave because I'm like, oh my God, like what do I do? So we're doing a treatment plan. So I go back in, I said, hey, I have a strange question. This is talking
yeah.
to the owner. I asked him, I said, is there any kind of physical or emotional stress in the home? And he starts crying. And he goes, yeah, we just lost another dog. They're moving. There was an issue with the job. So it was all of this stuff that he wasn't processing through his body. Instead, he was shoving it in his body, and the dog was trying to help him release it so he and the dog wouldn't energetically move into physical symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. And what I'm wondering about is when you heal an animal or you heal a human, is it any different? Or what are the similarities, but then also
Yeah.
what are the differences?
So for me, because everything I see it as the same energy. So when I look at an animal, I see consciousness, same as a
Yeah,
human.
that's right.
So I don't separate it out. I know a lot of people do, but when I heal, it's the same healing technique in the same energy, the same field, the same
Wow.
interconnection. So I can work with a human and an animal and be in both their fields at the same time because that separation isn't there for me.
Interesting. And when you look at the fields, do the emotions look the same, or do humans make it more complex, or is it still the same root type of motion,
Animals,
block,
yeah,
or
I
trauma?
love that question. Yeah, animals are very honest. Very rarely will they try to hide it. They're usually like, "Hey, this is what's going on. This is how I feel." Humans, based on our subconscious and an embarrassment and traumas
Yes,
or
yes.
insecurities, I don't think people show up and try to purposely hide stuff, but they'll tuck it away like in a back door or say, "Hey, wait a second. I don't know if I can look at this today." But the animal's going, "Yay, we can look at separation anxiety. We can look at abandonment." And sometimes the owner doesn't even know that that's in their sort of subconscious field yet.
Interesting. Yeah, it would seem like the animals kind of, they might project it a lot more clear than the owners because they don't necessarily have that perception of, being ashamed of it or not wanting to share it. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, no, I had a woman, she came to me because her dog had a lot of anxiety and she couldn't leave
Okay.
the house very often. And we actually had a lot of clients in this category. So what happened was as we dove into the dog's energy field and hers, it came up that both of them had a foundational core wounding around being alone and left behind in other lifetimes.
Uh,
So we jumped in and worked with clearing each of their fields and the timelines. And then all of a sudden, it was like each of them could breathe, feel more calm, and she could actually go out and do the things she needed to do without the dog tearing up the house and being crazy.
and the owner had the same issues, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yeah. Yeah. Because when we dove into it, that we went into the maternal line, right? So all of a sudden the mom had been left. There was divorce history of generational divorce and betrayal from, cheating on different spouses. So you see all these different things and you're like, well, no wonder this human has a fear of being alone, right?
right,
Like
right.
it's sort of genetically been passed on, but they're raising their hand to say, let's clear this. We don't want to even bring this in and move. Like we want to heal forward.
This is amazing. Really incredible stuff. Let me know if any of you are kind of feeling like your pet or some of the behaviors or some of the illnesses or things they're experiencing are the things that you're experiencing. This is a real interesting time to get into coherence because if we look at it, all of life is, as Dr. Bernadette said, consciousness, right? And consciousness is going to leave clues. It's going to leave if you know where to look. How does heart coherence come into this story? Because this kind of is where there's this bridge or web to all life itself that we really have to look at and understand, I would think.
Yeah, so where it really dropped in for me was during my arm injury. So I had my heart dog, Shelby, and man, at that point in my life when everything was, it was loss after loss and things being shut down and my job was on the line, my dog just kept coming to me and she says, you have to keep your heart open. You have to stay in your heart. And at
Yep.
that point, I didn't know what that meant. Like I was like, okay. And so the more I kept dropping in and breathing and really trying to stay present, it activated that heart coherent field, which we all have. Animals have it, plants have it. It's that greater cosmic heart network that we were
Mhm.
talking about earlier that
Yes. Yes. The heart network.
really goes in deeper and aligns us with the cosmic heart, which is truly our heart, but we still feel separated from that cosmic heart link.
Hmm.
So what I found was as we drop into that, even in these crazy chaotic times, we can still find a place of peace. We can still find a place where we can start to shift consciousness for our community, the planet, for the animal kingdom. So it's a real powerful pivot point. Sometimes that's what I call as a pivot point, where if we can get into that space, you can heal anything. That was what I learned.
Interesting. We get into that space, we can heal anything. What do you find keeps us from getting there? Like some of the voices that you will hear when you work with someone, what are some of the things that they are holding on to or the imprints or the consciousness that is saying, well, yeah, it'd be great, but and here's what I went through, here's what happened in this life. What are some
Yeah.
examples?
Yeah, so one thing I see very often is there's an old paradigm around no boundaries, giving all your
Boundaries.
energy away. Yep,
Yeah.
boundaries is a big one, and self-doubt and not trusting your own intuition. So we'll all get these intuitive nudges, but we're like, no, you know what? I'm too afraid because I might not get the love, the approval, the acknowledgement. So those are also big ones that I've seen with a lot of clients, and even in my life where I've done things instead of dropping into my heart, following my intuition. I'm like, I'm going to go do this because I'm hoping my mom will give me approval. And, then it goes south and I'm really angry then because I didn't get what my ego wanted
Yes.
or the
Yes.
wound. So what these are is they're just obstacles that our mind and the like how our brain perceive that possible hurt that creates a block. And it's more about can we release those with love and forgiveness in that heart space and say, wow, that was a learning lesson that actually was catalyzing me to move forward and understand my energy. And when I started looking at my life from that way in clients, man, stuff can shift so quickly because it's no longer being judged or shamed or, I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not.
Yeah, I really want to dive into this, and I'm excited we're going to get to some questions for people right now, maybe that are going through one issue and they're trying to figure out why it keeps coming up, why it keeps coming up. What would be the difference in what you're able to do with people in terms of getting into this heart coherence, this sacred coherence, versus someone trying to do it in a different way? Like, what do you feel is making the big difference in animals as well, because they either get better or they don't. There's no placebo there. Like they are either gonna have a reaction and they have probably not much of an idea what's going on. they're just going to respond to whatever is going on, the energy. So, what is making the difference here?
So what I've seen in my work and just through my own life, it's when I can get somebody and even myself into that heart space, you can channel energy from your soul, and that's pure light, that's pure
Uh,
love. And that is what I call one of the strongest healing forces that is freely available to all of us. But the problem is we doubt it. We go, oh, it's not possible. Like
right.
I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy. So we have all these stories, me included, that we've all worked through, but
Yeah.
I really find it's that connection to that person's soul that lets that sort of greater I am presence, their energetic self, true self, whatever we want to call it, really come in and say, we can heal that and let it
Wow.
go. Yeah.
Amazing. A lot of people writing in, a lot of animal stories, a lot of human stories. I mean, we're getting like an interesting thing here at U Wealth, where we've got people writing about their animals and also themselves. Now, you were just in Egypt. We mentioned this earlier, and I always think about the sphinxes and all of that. What happened in Egypt? Any animal stories or consciousness downloads that started coming in, maybe that you want to elaborate on a little?
Yeah, so for me, it was really the greater download of the sacredness of life.
Mm,
And I know that sounds a little like cliche, but it's as you're standing in these colossal temples and looking at the hieroglyphs and feeling the energy, everything is sacred from building to every worker. There was for me when I was there, it was such a feeling of oneness that yeah, you blip back into separation consciousness, but it felt so uncomfortable to be there that you're like, I want to be in that oneness. I want to realign. And the like while we were floating on the Nile, there's such a feminine energy coming from the Nile and sort of a
yes.
masculine from the land. So you start to balance, right? The masculine and feminine energies. And I saw that that's really globally happening, where we're bringing in a healthy masculine and a healthy feminine that blends into that heart space, that oneness, where it is really about being a blended whole. So that was powerful when I was there, experiencing it, seeing it, just feeling into it.
Do you feel like that area of Earth is, or maybe some of those sites are kind of embodying like a higher coherent energy than other parts? Are they kind of like a first wave of sorts where, like you said, embodiment of the balance between the masculine and the feminine on the river?
Yeah, they've had I mean, they're seated in Egypt. The pyramid is
Right.
located on the very center point of the planet, right? So that,
Really? Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know that.
that energy goes out to everything. And it's the pyramids aligned with the cardinal north. So it's just a very pivotal power
Mm,
point. But then you have not just that, but the land, but there's also still open portals there that people rarely talk about. So you still
okay.
have these energetic activations happening throughout the whole area, which then just amplifies that sort of greater coherent cosmic heart network. Instead of just one place, it's multiple activations.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. I remember talking with one of my good friends about the pyramids in Bosnia that not a lot of people know about.
Yep.
But in the Bosnian pyramids, there were some actual studies that they had done where people that had terminal illness, certain points in the pyramids, particularly inside the pyramids, were energy vortices. And they had actually like soul healed people of terminal illnesses. This was Ken Rolla telling me about Dr. Sam Avamich, I think it is, that was going in there, and they actually had doctors in there with terminally ill patients
Yep.
using these vortices for healing. So, I'm of the opinion that there's energetics coming in certain areas that can do miraculous things that we just don't fully understand. And it's why we have
Yeah.
to, keep unpacking
Well,
it.
yeah, while we were in the Great Pyramid, I happened to, and I always say happened, but I ended up being in the very center point of the King's Chamber.
Oh my
And
gosh.
our group ended up doing a circle and we did an oming ceremony real quick and it was super fun. But I felt this whole like departicleization of my body. And I felt like I was just sound and vibration. And then when we came out, I'm integrating, we went into the Queen's Chamber and I could feel stuff so I had a surgery last year. I could
Okay.
feel remnants of stuck energy clearing out of my body and my pelvic bowl from the surgery. I mean, like I wasn't consciously going, "Ooh, I want that healing." It was just all of a sudden I was like, "Wow, that was an interesting pain," and then it just filled with light. It was beautiful.
So what was maybe denser than the vortex of energy that you were in, like
Yep.
it either had to change, leave, transmute. And I mean, that's kind of, if I had to put my bet on kind of how, healing happens in sacred sites, it's like that kind of feels like would be one thing I put my money on.
Yeah.
Yeah, just amazing. This is kind of some of this energy that we're going to get into with this sacred coherence. I want to ask you, for people here, what are some signs maybe that they have heart blocks? And perhaps we should also talk a little bit about what are heart blocks.
Yeah, so some signs that heart blocks may be present are if you have what I call a repetitive issue,
Okay.
like a pattern that just keeps coming up, and you're like, I always hear from my clients, and even I hear myself saying, I was like, man, I thought I cleared that. I thought I healed that. Why does this so for me, why do
Yes.
I keep dating the same human? Or, it gets better, or why do I keep bringing the same sort of employer or some sort of chaos in my life? So we're looking at sort of what is that greater pattern or the theme that you keep revisiting at nauseum, right? That is a really strong indicator that there's a heart block. And again, I always say no judgment. It's like, let's dive in and say, what is that so we can clear it? Um, Animals will show up like with behavioral issues, food issues, medical stuff. I've seen so many pets have like thyroid issues and their owners have thyroid issues, pancreas, they have pancreatitis. I had unfortunately one that the dog blew up with cancer, and 6 months later, mom got diagnosed with cancer. And I'm not saying it's always a crossover, but if you keep having a repetitive issue, it's like we want to dive into that to find the heart block. So,
Do you find, Dr. Burnett, I'm sorry to
oh
interrupt.
yeah, go ahead.
Do you find that it is connected generally to a heart block often?
Well, so I'm going to say yes. And
Okay.
why I say that is because if the heart is in true coherence and love, these energies dissolve and melt. Because when you're standing in that coherent space, you're completely present. Your mind is very aligned. You're not in the past, you're not in the future, and your body can actually reach that higher vibration. So we create a healing opportunity. So for me, it's like they are related to the heart blocks on a very, very deep level. I mean, there are layers, but when you really bring it down, it's like I want to go to the block and get that soul energy coming through for both of them.
Just amazing. What I want to do, I want to get to some callers here in a moment, and we're going to be doing a process for everybody. If you are listening in on the live stream, we're gonna cut the live stream. If you're on Zoom, you're good. But go to a very special page. You'll see a link, and you can watch the rest of the interview.